Hello and welcome back to another edition of ESPN Scrum Reset. It's Sam Bruce back in the studio, formerly known as the Schmidt House. Christy, it's great to be back 7 weeks away. I've missed you. What the hell has been happening?
So good to see you, and yeah, you look very different to Britt Mitchell. She did a sterling job.
Great job as ever.
In your absence. It feels good to have you home, if I might say that. What are we calling this booth now?
Well, I know you guys put it out to social media and Britt to me directly while I was away. Look, I think there's a few options. I haven't settled on one yet. The kissing booth, I think, was Britt's that we'd obviously talked about in the background as well, but she put that out there. So I'm happy to give her the kudos for that one. I mean, there's Kiss and Tell Studios, the Long Kiss Goodnight Studios. So there's any number of, or I actually was thinking on the weekend that the Keep It Simple Stupid. Remember that acronym
Yes.
the teachers used to tell you when you
Yes.
were writing stuff or any subjects that you wonderful listeners out there battled through your school years. I'm sure you had that piece, excuse me, of advice at some point or another. So I reckon they're the two front runners, either the Keep It Simple Stupid Studio, or which is a mouthful, admittedly, or as we said, the Kissing Booth. We'll come back next week and I'll have settled on it.
Rightio. Okay, I think that's enough on that, though.
In particular, that first one, that's a tongue twister. Mate, as I said, yes, been a lot happening. I've kind of been, for the first couple of weeks, I was, at arm's length. I was away overseas in Italy, and I will come to your question, Hugh Tyndall, around Aperols and Moretti's shortly. Needless to say, there was a few. But then, tuned back in. Probably the one moment I will mention, I was flying out of Italy, and the Wallabies were leading Ireland. 24-12 at the break. That's when I had to turn off the old Wi-Fi, go into plane mode for the trip to Singapore. Got into Singapore thinking, yep, surely this is going to be a win, and then turned on WhatsApp and got hit with a barrage of messages to go to social media and find the result, and just like a kick in the proverbial. Wasn't a great start to returning down under.
Yeah, well, the good news is, mate, that was about a month ago, and that's totally in the rearview mirror.
Good.
I think a better page to turn is the first test under the belt now for Les Kiss, a win in Osaka, Brucey. A tense-old affair, wasn't it? 35-33. We've got headlines to go to first, though, and my headline is, I'll start on a positive note, Josh Canham. I do not know how the bloke was not player of the match. I think it was Angus Bell who was holding up whatever he was holding up with his award.
Off the bench.
Off the bench.
You don't say that often.
Well, he was very, very good, but Canham was in absolutely everything in that first half particular, winning penalties, winning throws against the line out, stealing there. He was magnificent. It continues his rich vein of form.
Well, it's 4 tests running, right? He's probably been top 3 players each week.
Yeah, and Nick Frost was a controversial omission, even though he didn't have a great season, did he, for the Brumbies? But I was talking to Ewan McKenzie not long ago, and he described him, and this is maybe a month ago, before that test against Ireland, and he said that he's got a bit of John Eales about him.
Jeez, a fair rap.
Fair rap from a bloke who's hadn't started a test at that point in time. But Link always managed to get some... his talent identification was generally pretty good, wasn't it? And Josh Canham has totally killed it over the last month, and he's been brilliant.
Well, he's always had that ability in the loose, hasn't he? He's an athletic frame, former basketballer, I think, growing up down there in Melbourne. And like any lock, it takes time to develop the finer points of the game, that being specifically set piece. But another line-out steal on the weekend against none other than probably, the number 2 player in Super Rugby this year behind Quinn Tupai. You would say that Warner Dearns was that good and that key in that Hurricanes victory. So, you probably say that if you didn't tip Warner on the weekend, then it was certainly honours even. A great head-to-head battle. But I agree. He's been the story across the 4 test matches so far this year, no doubt about it, and excited to see his development continue. My headline is Eddie Jones bringing rugby league to Japan, and I've got the team name, the Tokyo Tamagotchi.
Nice. Love it.
You love that?
I do love it. I didn't know where you were going with your headline, but that is Eddie, isn't it? It's always he's a journo's dream in many ways because he gives you something every time he speaks, or doesn't speak, does he? But one thing about Eddie, he's unearthed an absolute gem over the last month in Ito, the 21-year-old 10, and he doesn't mind backing young guys, but he is a serious talent, and we saw that the 10, 11-minute mark, didn't he, when he just burnt
Hit
Harry
the gas,
Wilson, scored a try. There was a nice left foot grubber in there as well early on that unleashed his winger. He's a serious find for Japan.
He is, and they really stuck it to the Wallabies, didn't they, for much of that match? I mean, to me, I did wonder their decision to take a second penalty goal there between the 50 and 60th minute mark when they had the Wallabies under the pump then, and I thought that was the moment. If I was certainly Japan skipper, I'm surprised the advice didn't come down from the coach's box to push for the try there, because that would have really rattled the Australians and put the pressure on those closing minutes. As I said, as the match turned out from there, I think the Wallabies might have almost turned the ball over from that ensuing kickoff. And then we had the try from Taniela Tupou that gave them that little bit of breathing room that you thought when they got that, particularly under the sticks, was a certain 7 points, that the game was, if not done, then just about as good as. Japan needing those 2 scores, and while they did get that late try with, 1 minute, 90 seconds left on the clock, it was probably going to be too much for them to go 80 metres upfield and do it all again. So, look, I guess an unconvincing performance to start with, but a win's a win. We know Japan have improved. I know you're going to speak on this a little bit shortly, but if you're Les Kiss, you get out of jail. It was a bit of a hospital pass to start with. There's really nothing to be gained from that on the weekend, apart from seeing potentially a few new faces that we didn't during July, and freshening up the squad a little bit. Get away with a win. You come back to Townsville. This week is where you really want to see that better performance come in and a convincing Wallabies win at Queensland Country Bank Stadium.
Yeah, so it was 35-32, wasn't it, in the end? And yeah, it was a drop ball from Michael Leach that sealed the deal for the Wallabies, and there would have been a few sighs in the coach's box when the Wallabies confirmed, I think, Max Jorgensen kicking out and deep into the stands. The reality is that Japan and Japanese rugby's improved, hasn't it? The League One, it's the competition over the last 20 years. It was once where guys went and it was an early superannuation package, wasn't it? But now it's very much players are going there, even as teenagers, or if you haven't even made your test debut, like the Harry Hockings or the Isaac Lucases of the world. But in 2007, Australia won 91-3 in that World Cup pool match. And now, for the last 2 tests, they've scraped home with victories. And it was 1915 last year with Joe Schmidt in charge in Tokyo, and now 35-32, 3-point. And there almost seems like a bit of a relief that we've got it done. Very little experimentation this test, as well as the test match in Tokyo 10 months ago, when Ryan Lonergan didn't even get on the bench. Didn't come off the bench. Jake Gordon was entrusted for the full 80 minutes. And what do you think? For me, it's a concern that Japan, they have to bring in half their team from overseas who are non-Japanese born because they don't have the talent there. And you look at that side, and there's 5 of them basically that are Aussies there. How good was Cornell? He was in
best game I think I've seen him play for Japan.
Yeah, he was brilliant. And we can talk about some of the analysis in a moment around how Japan managed to open up the Wallabies. But I think broadly there is a concern. We can't view this through rose-tinted glasses around that it's a win. How on earth are you just scraping over against the Japanese side when half of them are born in Australia anyway? To me, it seems like your talent identification is not going great if you're losing all these guys. But secondly, very little experimentation, very few opportunities given to wider squad because you're backing these because you're not sure you're going to win these days, and that's reflected in the scoreline now.
Well, we've spoken about the talent ID stuff a lot, and it came up last year during the Lions series when obviously there was a number of Australians across that squad. And I agree with you there that is not where it needs to be in Australian rugby. And we're going to come to, a couple of guys from the Waratahs development programs who are heading off shortly. But, look, I think you have got to give Japan credit. Remember, this is a nation who did beat the Springboks at the 2015 World Cup. And we know, as you rightly point out, that they are made up of, about 50-50 local players and those brought in from overseas. There's issues around what that looks like going forward, I think, at the moment, isn't there, around exactly their eligibility? That's a bit of pushback now with League One and the National Union. So where that shakes out. Look, they are a grossly improved team from what they were back in 2007. That being said, Australia should be beating them and beating them, better than they did on the weekend. They were their own worst enemy at times.
They were, weren't they? Because I know Les Kiss didn't want to buy into the idea that Australia played into their hands, but they did. Like, the quick and tap play by Fraser McWright earlier in the first half. Obviously, the one midway through the second half with Declan Meredith that came off the back of that mistake from Japan, not from the kickoff when they were, very much in the fray at 3 points behind or so. But they were outplayed. Declan Meredith was outplayed by a 21-year-old who hasn't played a professional game outside these 4 test matches that he started in a row in the number 10 jersey. Like, there's some fundamental issues with Australian rugby, how they see the game, the nervousness of some of the players when Japan is pushing Australia so deep, and there's a couple of guys that are coming through. Like, Ito looks like a supremely gifted player that's going to trouble a lot of international outfits going forward. But I think it's a concern when you...
I got to agree. And we had you put the call out before we came on an hour or so ago, and one from Jock Cudmore. Why don't we play our own style? Seems we try to beat teams at their own game. Japan were frantic. We tried to be more frantic. We always hear we are focused on ourselves in inverted commas, but on game day it looks like all we've done is watch the opposition and play into their hands. Yep, Jock, I think it's an excellent point. And the Declan Meredith quick tap in particular was mind-boggling. I responded to Matty.
Matt Ward.
No, not Matty Ward. Someone else. I'll come to it. I've had a brain fade. That it was 13F stuff, and that's what it was. To have a scrum win of that dominance at test level. Knowing how the game is refereed at the moment, if you don't get a pushover try or at least another penalty, the yellow card's not going to be too far away for your third gamer fly half to run in and take a quick tap, then fumble the quick tap, which results basically in a turnover 1 or 2 phases later, was inexcusable. And that was deer in the headlights stuff, no doubt about it. Miles Amatosero, we haven't mentioned yet. Concerns, around that. Everyone has had basically since he was included in this squad, and the way he plays the game, how close he does to the line of, aggression, managed aggression and, bordering on foul play. He got it wrong on the weekend. 50-50 discussion around whether it was a yellow or a red. I think it's pretty comfortable with the red. I was anyway when we saw that reverse angle. Might have been 5 minutes or so after. He was yellow carded. Was there mitigation there? There was certainly a drop from Warner Dearns, but if you come in like that, I thought Luke Jacobson was very lucky to get away with it against Ireland for the All Blacks a few weeks ago. You just want to see that consistency. But on Amatosero, look, this was always going to be a chance, I thought, from the moment he was named. Is he a player that can get to somewhere in the future of being a real contributor at test level? Yeah, I think once he gets his head right and learns how to manage that aggression correctly.
Yeah, I agree. I thought it was I liked, and Britt and I spoke about this last Thursday, I actually liked the fact that Kissy backed a couple of these guys and he gave an opportunity for them, because if you're in the squad, I think you should use the squad at times. And they weren't sure around Declan Meredith. I think they now know about Declan Meredith. And similarly with Miles Amatosero, I don't think they necessarily knew. I think they see the potential there. The ceiling is very high for him at the moment. Maybe not quite there, but what it means is now Lucan Salakaia-Loto either comes straight back into the 15 or the 23. But yeah, I thought the actual card itself, it was an ugly incident in the sense that it was direct contact to the head, but it was extremely late, the mitigation. I think the whole idea of this cocking of the shoulder and arm that you're not able to wrap, it wouldn't have been an issue if there hadn't have been that split-second last-moment drop. So, obviously, it changes when you see that from a officiating point of view, which means that the mitigation doesn't come into consideration. But I think, and maybe that's an area where the commentators actually need to work on explaining that so that the punters know at the time when they're watching it. But, yeah, it was maybe a clumsy moment, because was it necessary for him to come from 2 metres away to slam him how he did?
That was the issue, that, it was almost saw the red mist a bit, wasn't it? And thought there's a chance to put a shot on here. And got it wrong, as, rightfully alluded to there. And Brett McKay was good on pointing this out on social media around the actual framework, that when it was ruled a shoulder charge, basically that, wipes mitigation away. So, look, he fronts the judiciary, I think, tonight or certainly
over the next 24 hours
in the coming hours. There'll be an update from Sansa on Tuesday morning. That release just coming an hour or so ago, as well as we record this on Monday afternoon. So interested to see what kind of suspension he gets at if the Wallabies attempt to fight it. I don't know if you've got any ideas around whether they will. So stay tuned on that one for the coming days, but he certainly, you would think, won't play this week. As you mentioned, Talakai Loto likely to come in there. And partner Josh Canham, who is, as we mentioned off the top, going brilliantly. What about some other positives then? Harry Potter on the wing looked good. Some good moments from Tom Wright as well. Anyone else up front? Angus Bell off the bench was good.
I think Jeremy Williams made a good impact off the bench. He's a good player, isn't he? Fraser McWright had one or two moments himself. Look, I think there was elements where you can applaud the character and staying in the fight. I think we've got to get beyond that, though. We've been talking about character for years and years, and at the end of the day, like, you've just got to win, and decision making, I think, is more important at this point in time. Harry Potter looks elusive, doesn't he? It was pretty poor defence. It was a poor pass from Swaley that hits the ground that Potter does well. He runs a great line and they score. Nice passage straight after halftime where they were definitely more direct, weren't they? Where they offloaded at will and it caused the Japanese some serious headaches, and it eventuated in Jorgensen's scoring. I thought Paisami defensively was strong. He played it like Paisami does, doesn't he?
And we saw that first real sign of the difference from the Les Kiss, how deep he went into that line for that pullback pass that led to that try for Tom Wright, I think it was there, the second in the first half. That was kind of carbon copy Reds into Wallabies under Les Kiss, I thought, a sign of things to come. In fairness to Declan Meredith, I think there was some pretty good hands in that play, and he did plug the corner well with a couple of penalty kicks.
He's always been good at that.
Good to see him get that right. Conversely, there was probably, 2 or 3 exits at least that, kind of skewed off the side of the boot as well. So, look, have you got an update this week? Certainly all signs last week around Carter Gordon was suggesting that he was pretty close, if not ready, to come back in. The other one, we've had Ben Donaldson waiting in the wings now for a few weeks. I don't think we'll see Declan Meredith get another start this week. It's whether it is a Gordon or a Donaldson. Which way do you think it goes?
Yeah, I think Gordon was 100% fit last week. He was, a week earlier, he'd trained 90% of the time and was pretty good. I think some of the players were a bit confused as to why he wasn't in the 23. You saw him even at halftime taking some high catches, and when he was wearing the water bib. I think he comes back into the 23, no doubt about that. And if he doesn't, then you're really scratching your head around it. But there'll be a couple of changes. I think, obviously, no Zane Nongor. Does Massimo DeLutis come into it? He could be Wallaby 1000. It obviously took a bit out of them that game. So you can understand a couple of changes using your squad. I think this is the time that they've got to be brave, because you got the test against Argentina, and you probably want to at least win one of those two. And then after that, it only gets harder with the South Africans and the All Blacks to follow. We'll see how many are left standing at the end of this greatest rivalry. But, I think the big call going forward, and I don't think we'll see it this week, is in the midfield. I'm still a big advocate for Sam McCreevy being in and amongst the squad. I still don't understand why he's not. I know the insurance plays a factor in it. But Paisami, when Ikitau comes back, can he play at 13? I still think he's better at 13, and it probably it draws this greater question, which was what we saw on the weekend, is Swaley. He featured on the wing, didn't he, when they decided to have Meredith at 10, Donaldson at 15, and they pushed Swaley onto the wing.
Isaac Henry came on,
Yeah, Henry comes on at 13. What do you think of that idea, the mix? Can you have, where is Swaley best suited at the moment? Because I still think Kissy, even though he's spoken about the fact that he sees him at the 13 at the moment, and quite a few of the players have gone into bat and saying, yeah, he's a 13, I still think he's very much thinking about the wing or fullback. I would absolutely be pulling the trigger very soon about having a match or two, either on the wing or at fullback, because I think you need to go into a World Cup knowing that there's more than one fullback in Tom Wright. He had a good game. He's returned to a bit of form, hasn't he? He's still got that rocks and diamonds, that edge of the seat kind of nature that he plays on the sword. nature. But I think that Suaalii could be the number 2 fullback if Jordan Petaya's not in there for the Argentina test. And I'd love to see it sooner rather than later. Just a different picture.
Yeah, key breakdown turnout from Tom Wright as well wasn't there.
That was a huge moment in the game.
Late in the first half.
Yeah.
So a big play there. Look, there has been too much talk about it across the board in Australian rugby for it not to happen at some point, I think. And I think this week represents a pretty good opportunity.
The talk's been everywhere, but within the Wallabies.
Yeah, and you wonder when that is going to get through. Too many... like you got your Drew Mitchells, Adam Ashley Cooper, guys who've played 80, 100 tests, some big names who know what it takes to get it done at test level. And I think that the thing is we keep probably seeing the same issue in his game. There's some defensive deficiencies around when he rushes out of the line. We know there is a new, obviously Scott McLeod coming in, and I thought their defensive setup early on was really good for probably 5 or 10 minutes, and then it kind of all went to the proverbial after that. But the high ball threat, cross kicks, we can see how well he gets up from kickoffs. We know how effective Folau was that, particularly in those first couple of years in Super Rugby when the Waratahs, under Michael Cheika, did kick to him well out in the corners to use that height and that vertical leap that he has got. I hope we see it before the end of the year. I think the fact that there was a shift on the weekend, albeit a backline reshuffle using the replacements, forced it. But maybe that is the start of bigger things to come. Whether it's, this week or away in Argentina. I mean, Australia, if there is one place where they're not short, it is in the outside backs. But the changing picture that he could deliver, the profile of athlete that he is against all those others in that group right now, I think is absolutely worth something looking at.
It has to be. I just look at the Wallabies and I see there's a reluctance to use kicking strategy to their strengths. We've seen Ito, and I saw him against the Irish, cross-field kicks. New Zealand, when they're generally playing really well, there's a lot of kicking involved. South Africa certainly is the case as well.
Yep.
There just seems like a real hesitation, for kicking other than the box kick and hoping a winger can get there. And I just don't think we're very, very good in that area with Jorgensen and the Tools and the Peaches of the world. But I think that Suaalii just looks his best when he's a little bit wider, that he can run onto the ball.
Bit of clean air.
And some clean air. And he reminds me of Suaalii, of Folau when he can do that. But, it took only a few games for the 2018 experiment to end with Folau because he just wasn't an outside centre. Sure, he could do it better than some, but they found him much more effective at fullback. And I think that will eventually come. Like, his best games were still for the Waratahs at fullback. So, Lottie Takiri just can't believe it. I spoke to Scott Wisemantle a month ago, and he was talking about the fact that he has to play at fullback at some point. Like, what are we scared about here?
Good question. All right. Any other changes? You would probably think that Angus Bell comes back in to start this week.
Brendan Payer and most, do you imagine?
As well at hooker. Maybe a back row reshuffle. Do you see a Tizana getting a start at 7? Rob Valentini maybe shifting to the bench. Tom Hooper is available for selection, I think. Rejoined the squad probably today. Was announced by the Wallabies on Sunday afternoon. Is he another option potentially at lock there as opposed to Salakai Loto? Could he shift, at 6 and maybe have Valentini come off the bench? A few ideas there to kick around.
Yeah, there he is. I don't know if you're rushing Tom Hooper back. He's missed, obviously, a fair bit of footy now. Hasn't been involved in the group. There's only going to be 1 or 2 training sessions. He wouldn't have ever been under a Les Kiss coaching environment. So they will be going to Argentina. I'm pretty sure Tom Hooper, he might be available, might not. I'll have to come back about that one because, I don't think Tony Alatupo's available for the Argentinian test. So you just want to let them rip at this point. Charlie Cahill had 20 minutes, which was good to see him back. But he almost had one moment. He ran onto that ginormous forward pass from Paisami when he. But that's what Cahill can do. He can hit a hole. He can find some space. So it would be nice to be able to see him get some more minutes. Wilson didn't have his best game, but I don't think he's going to be going anywhere.
No.
He had a great performance last year in North Queensland and Townsville when he pointed to the corner, and it was Belly that scored, wasn't it? That had that great win against Argentina. So you'd want to see a few changes. You would. Does Les Kiss become a little bit more conservative, knowing how close the last game was? I think Japan are going to go for it again, knowing how close they were to beating them this time round. So, the pleasing element is the international game's pretty healthy. There's more players at the top table, but I want to see more from this Wallabies team.
So what are we saying? 15 to 20 point victory you'd like to see this weekend should be the minimum?
Or if they can tighten up their work around the ruck, which was just inexcusably poor, just switching off and not knowing who's the person around the ruck. They were beaten 3 or 4 times weren't they? That was probably the one shortcoming. If they can tighten that area, I don't know if Japan will get as much success as what they and trouble that they caused the Wallabies on the weekend.
Yeah, my apologies to Matty McGoldrick on Twitter. That's who I was having a yarn with the other night. One here from Bomber. Why wasn't the test on free-to-air on the weekend? We know the answer. There was a league game on Channel 9. What can RA do to overcome this roadblock to rugby growing its audience, given Channel 9's obvious bias and preference to league? Not having the test on free-to-air was a disgrace. Now, as I understand, contractually, 9 don't have to. It's an away Wallabies game. Only the domestic Wallabies test they are contractually obliged to show. So, you know what? I guess it's 9 just going, well, good luck to you.
Well, RA's made their bed, haven't they? Now they've got to sleep in it. And I think it's only now that the punters are probably starting to realise that. Like, I know that there was a lot of shit that was put on Fox especially towards the last few of the years of their contract.
I think rightfully so.
Yeah, right. No, totally rightfully so. But everyone, I think, thought that this was going to bring rugby into the new age with a proper free-to-air component. Unfortunately, it's just been washed away, and that's a real disappointment, I think.
Well, it was the old deal with Super Rugby when they were obliged to show a free-to-air game, and this year, what do we get? 2 from memory? 2-3 games through the Super Rugby season under this new broadcast deal?
At most.
So, yeah, Bomber, I mean, mate, that's kind of the lay of the land at the moment. And I don't see, given, as I understand contracts, that they've really got a leg to stand on Rugby Australia.
No, I don't know if they do. It was interesting. When I spoke to Czech 3 or 4 weeks ago for a piece in the Oz, I didn't actually put it in the story, but we brought up the whole idea of the $5.3 billion deal and what it means for rugby. And it can't be great in terms of the player and the retention kind of perspective at the moment. But what he said was, and it was valid, well, actually, it might not be a bad thing for rugby because going forward, they can go to competitors and go, show us some money and make sure your product's good and your house is in order. But the fact that 7 was going after the NRL, there should be, if you create competitive tension, enough people out there that are going to look at rugby, especially off the back of a World Cup, and you've got to go in there and you've got to fight for yourself. Yeah, wins help, don't they? But the fact is, 7 started out of nowhere, showing a magazine show, whatever they call it. Yeah. Why isn't rugby pushing for the same? And they should be.
Good point. How's McWright tracking from Jamie Wall all the way over in South Africa? Hello, Jamie. Good to see you tuning in, mate, in the Republic.
I'm sure he's fine.
There you go. All right, we've got a few other questions here that we'll come to as we go. Now, obviously, the news last week around Zach Fittler taking a 1-year deal with Poe. Is it Selection Palois over in the top 14? Basically, not offered a deal by the Waratahs. We all know what's going on in the Waratahs at the moment, and this is probably a broader discussion around that. Comes on the back of Leo Jakes heading to the Sharks. Both guys were in the under-20s this year. Jakes was there all year. I think Fittler was a bit of a call-up through injury. We know Zach Fittler is playing sort of second grade for East. Did he play first grade on the weekend?
Think so, no.
A couple of appearances off the bench. I mean, for one, I guess it's good that he is staying in rugby and he hasn't. Maybe there weren't deals in rugby league available to him, but he certainly is more of a rugby player than a league player at this point in time. When I watched him playing schoolboy footy in the early years, he was a league player then. You would see how he approached the game, his movement, how he entered contact, and had a bit of a habit of isolating himself. I think that's all finished. a lot of reaction to this, probably more around the name Fittler than, as you would expect, than where his talent is at this point in time. But as I said, there's a broader discussion around what is going on at the Waratahs right now, who is running the show, how hamstrung they are by not having a coach and going to players when you sit down for meetings. Well, we don't know who that's going to be at this point in time. We know there's the checker rumours and everything going on. Have they met? Haven't they? I think there's a question around that to come. A few other guys in the mix, Stephen Hoyles, Chris Latham, Chris Whitaker, these guys that have all been thrown up over the recent times. And at the same time, they go and sign a 37-year-old Bernard Foley, which has been coming for much of the year. Nick Phipps less so, but they're both going to be there next year. And you lose a Jack Bowen. It all kind of feels like, it's lacking leadership and an actual a strategy. How are we going to not only put a team out that can be competitive next year that befits the biggest rugby base in the country, but also what is the bigger plan going forward, Christy?
Well, yeah, Britt and I spoke a bit about it last week in terms of the initial news, but it can't help when you just don't have the leadership already there in place. And I'm pretty sure Michael Checker might have even reached out and said, why don't you hold the phone here? Because he's got a relationship with Brad Fittler. But they can't do that when there's contracts at play and you've got certain time limits around how long you can wait out a decision. So, look, he's not a complete player by any stretch of the imagination. But in a year or two, the hope is that you will be. And at the moment, the Waratahs are looking for another midfielder, even before Fittler wasn't there because he wasn't even part of the top tier side this year anyway. But I think it just points to once again to the lack of a clear plan and strategy around where do we need to get to next year and in 3 years and indeed in 5 years. And BJ Maher is the general manager there at the moment, and I'm sure he's not finding it particularly easy that he's being asked on a daily basis who the coach is going to be, and at the moment there's just not an answer. I spoke to John Connolly earlier today, and he said to me, why isn't Stephen Hoyles just the head coach anyway? He's done it. He's been a head coach now for a number of years, took Randwick to a title, has experience over. He's been with the Sevens program before with the national team, and he obviously has been with California Legion recently. And I said, look, I don't have an issue with that at the moment either. I'm a big advocate of Hoylesy, but I think that decision will be made over the next week or two. My understanding is Hoylesy needs to notify California by the end of the month.
If he's extending,
If he's extending or he's staying on, because obviously they will need to make contingency plans. So I would think that over the next couple of weeks, there's a lot that happens. And it's been a little bit of, there's a bit of silence at the moment around it over the last day or two. And part of that is because Czech said, there's the Lebanon stuff happening in the background and he's all about the NRL titles. I think he's buying himself a bit of time. Maybe there's strategies going on around how to sign this guy because he won't be cheap either, nor would Stephen Hoyles do his own right. But there's a lot going on and they need to start fitting in some of these pieces of the puzzle.
So I guess a question from Obby on Twitter or X. Who is actually making the decisions around recruitment right now? Is it BJ who's doing the job? Okay, we got that. How then
with Peter Horn, him reporting into Peter Horn, who's the Rugby Australia head of comms and head of high performance, slightly different. But there's so many competing factors at the moment. Here's one, for instance. Last week on the Wednesday and Thursday, but it was for the vast majority on the Wednesday, a high performance summit up in Brisbane. It's not been reported on, not been spoken about. Why, I don't understand. It was really well run, I'm told, by Matt Wilkie, who's a good operator from everything I've been told over the last few years. But it's a high performance summit, and your head of high performance is in Japan, in Osaka, with the whole Wallabies coaching team. Had it been pushed back a week, like this test wasn't just organised overnight, was it? It was months in the making. Had it been pushed back a week, there's a chance that not just the Wallabies would have been in town because they're in Brisbane at the moment. It was run in Brisbane last week, but Peter Horn could have been there. Like, what are we doing with your head of high performance and the main leaders there being the Wallabies, and they're not even in the same country. It just wouldn't happen if it was in South Africa or New Zealand. But he's wearing a few hats and he's going in a few different spots. He was watching from the stands in Osaka on the weekend. But it makes me laugh a little bit what goes on at times.
Fair enough. And it's hard to disagree. Christy, where do you think then the Waratahs job, right now, your gut feel, where does it wind up? Is it a check with Stephen Hoyles under him and maybe there's a bit of a strategic longer plan where Check does year one and then there's a handover period to Stephen Hoyles or someone else, Chris Latham, Chris Whittaker, any of these other guys, because as you mentioned, Check has got the Lebanon commitment through the Rugby League World Cup. He's got the Roosters commitment right now through to the next, 3-4 rounds of the NRL to go, and it looks like they will go deep into the finals. He's not going to jump out right now, whereas the Waratahs, they're up and running soon. They've got Super Rugby AU. We're going to come to that competition shortly. There's decisions around recruitment to be made, as we mentioned, planning for next year. This needs to be happening ASAP. Where do you think it lands?
The honest answer is I'm not 100% sure, but I think that there was enough in the last week and a half to suggest that it will go down a Check or Hoyles kind of route. Definitely Hoyles is willing to work with Check and vice versa. Yep. They've had a couple of conversations and they met even before Checker had thrown his hat in the ring, and it was just around life. Check obviously coached Hoylesy. So I think those two are definitely the front runners. Check's always a bit of a joker, and that's how it's described to me in the pack, where you never quite know it. Nick Phipps caught up with him last week. Before that, it was Jake Gordon and Bernard Foley, from my understanding, that caught up with him.
Feels like the planets are starting to align.
To align, but financially, if there's a time when there's a bit of money in the coffers to turn around a team and an organisation, it's right now, because it's just come back in. So I don't think that should be an issue. Is it? It could be still. But I think Phil Wall's keen on the idea. I'm not sure if Peter Horn is sold on the idea. He's a bit more of a systems sort of person. We know someone who can blow up a system or two is probably Michael Checker. So I just don't know if you can be so destructive if you're in a place for about a 12-month period. So I would feel comfortable there. But I'll tell you what, there are some reasonable operators going around. Like John Manenti has turned Sydney Uni around really quickly. He's done a good job everywhere he's gone. He's a very safe pair of hands. I think he, at some point in time, deserves a crack in an Australian Super Rugby.
Are they reticent, given how the Darren Coleman, after a bright start in year one, deteriorated badly years 2 and 3?
It's possible, but they could not be more different as personalities. Okay. So, there was a lot going on in Darren Coleman's life, particularly year 3 at the Waratahs. That certainly won't happen with John Manenti. Chris Latham as well is another one. Like, if he doesn't get a crack in Super Rugby, I hope he finds and lands a gig somewhere at a good team overseas. And because at the moment, I think the feeling around the US and Major League Rugby is it's a Mickey Mouse competition. That being said, it's all around the country, and travelling and to be unbeaten how he was a fine effort.
You're not allowed to use that expression, mate, when you're in the Disney kind of family. So
I'm sorry.
Just a warning there. We might have to cut that one out so I can keep my job. Okay, I made a point here to kind of contrast this whole Waratahs environment right now with the Reds, who have known who their head coach has been for months now, were proactive in that space. They're contracting. We saw them sign the big 16-year-old schoolboy the other week, whose highlights are all over YouTube and socials. There is a broader, a framework and strategic plan around how they want to become and improve rugby in Queensland. And the players, your Trayvon Pritchard has come through that system and has gone from schoolboys into 19s, into Reds, into pretty close to being a Wallaby, if not this year, then next. Obviously, the injury that they have their proverbial together, and the Waratahs, by extension, Rugby Australia, absolutely do not.
Yeah, and there's one organisation that just doesn't feel comfortable with that, and that's Rugby Australia. But they, and I actually mean that, because I think there's a bit of envy around how the Reds have turned it around.
Of course there is.
They've had a bit of help, obviously, but the Reds have had stability at CEO, general manager. They've had a clear plan around what's going on with the coach for a while. You could argue, should Zane Hilton be the coach? The training wheels should be coming off pretty soon. maybe he's the next person following Vern Cotter. But it's you're right. I do think they've underachieved on the field to a point. I think, but you're right in the sense that
they plateaued.
They have plateaued a little bit, but I think they are at least are very conscious of some of the areas that they need to improve on. So yeah, it's a good distinction to make around the two and how they're going.
I think Art Vanderlei, we've kind of answered your question around the Waratahs and checked there. Moving forward, so I guess stay tuned with that. One here from Hugh96. NRL keep coming up with an array of initiatives. For example, Global Round, buying into English NRL. I don't think that's going to go ahead. Last I heard, the Super League. Women's Magic Round. Do you see RA becoming proactive, coming up with any proactive initiatives? How is RA tracking to the broadcasting KPI? So there's a couple in there. I mean, look, clearly Rugby Australia doesn't have the NRL's money, and good luck to the NRL and Peter V'landys what they went out and achieved. They have got money to burn. Now, whether Global Round is going to be the success that PVL thinks it will.
I think it will in Hong Kong. I was talking about this to people a month or two ago around the NRL should be setting their sights on Hong Kong. You think about all the expats that are there, from Aussies to English. A weekend there would go off.
Yeah, but it's going to be the same thing as Vegas, right? It's going to be a one-off. That, you know,
sure, but it's much closer for Aussies if they want to go up there.
Travel, but that's what happens with Vegas, as is. Like, I get the concept.
Yeah.
I'm just playing devil's advocate, saying that I don't believe it's going to, take rugby league to the global masses by one game a year. Anyway, to come back to the actual question, I mean, what's Rugby Australia thinking along these lines? Are they considering any kind of initiatives? Do they think they need to? What should be their priorities off the back of their windfall last year? We know women's rugby has been one of the key ones. I'm still waiting on a Wallaroos coach. How many ever months on it is now? So, look, they've been ticking off, some things, very few along as they go. But where, I guess, should the focus be with the World Cup money obviously to come in the next couple of years, beyond 27 and then the women's in 29? That is, going to have to sustain the game for a long while. We've got all these things around recruitment and retention and younger players, with the NRL being armed with more money than they've ever had before. It's a daunting prospect, but I guess, will they or are they going to rise to the challenge?
Well, I'm going to throw it back on you to begin with, because I wrote a yarn around that a couple of months ago in the Oz around what are some of the
10 questions one,
right?
Yeah,
the 10 questions around what is Rugby Australia thinking of doing, and we still hear crickets, absolute crickets. So tell me, what do you think?
Well, mate, I'd love to know too, and as I've said a number of times, we requested Phil Wall come on here and share some of this with you in this very studio, and have heard cricket's coming back the other way. I haven't even really seen him. I think he had a sit down with Stan last year. I don't think I've seen a similar one this year. But people, as I said to you when we first came into the studio today, I sense a real unrest at the moment amongst the broader Australian rugby community, more so than usual, that extends beyond the Wallabies right now. And look, I don't know that the similar initiatives that the NRL is going to be taking to the world are needed in their kind of different, I guess, KPIs there that rugby league is trying to grow and, grow its footprint beyond Australia, because they will soon max out here once the Perth team comes in and PNG. So, look, that's their prerogative moving forward. A Magic Round, look, we've got Super Round, I guess. That was a raging success in New Zealand. You've got to say that, okay, the Anzac Bledisloe is one thing that is an absolute positive that they have got off the ground. Women's rugby absolutely needs greater investment, and off the back of that, the women need to deliver better than they have to this point in time, no doubt about it. But could they do more? Absolutely. For me, the big one is the junior player, the player retention, how they are going to fight this greater threat from the NRL with two extra teams and money that more often than not they're not going to be able to compete with at the younger age groups. What is the strategy to keep as many of these promising young kids in the game, and also just firm up, the schoolboy and the junior club positions from what they are right now?
Yeah, and I was reading Andrew Webster earlier today, who's pointing out the fact that if they don't have 20 teams, the NRL, they will lose $20 million a year. So financially, NRL is thinking bigger, better, and they tell you. They're not afraid to tell you that, are they? Whereas RA is thinking insular and I don't think there's the big picture thinking that's required at the moment. And I'm not sure they have the right people in the right roles to think that way either. Good point around the Anzac test. It's good that it's up and running every second year.
Yep.
That should become an annual event, and I think hopefully in time it will. But if they don't have the money, which we know that they're struggling with financially, but with the fires that are overseas and in the NRL, it's all around, for me, schoolboy rugby, particularly strengthening that. I'd love to see a TV component come into it with first to 15. I'd love to see some more rivalries between the Nudgies of the world.
I've always long called for a National Schools Cup. Now, I know this obviously needs buy-in from schools, and they are separate to, Australian Rugby or New South Wales Rugby, Queensland Rugby, etc. But that, the whatever it's been called for when I first came up was the Commonwealth Bank Cup and the Rugby League. I'm not sure what it is now, the Arrive Alive Cup sort of thing. The National Schoolboys, where you declare a national champion. Pretty much, I know New Zealand have got it. I know England have got it. I know Scotland have got it. South Africa have it. Their schoolboy rugby's off the charts.
Yeah.
There should be, as I said, I know you need to get the associations together to make this happen. It wouldn't have to be compulsory, but at least give them the opportunity to volunteer or to make themselves available to contest such a tournament.
Absolutely. And just get people in the room, start the conversation. And if you don't get it, well, at least you've tried it and you've told people about it, because I think you need to start bringing some ideas to the table here. I'd love to see, I was talking to a former retired, long-serving NRL playmaker who won a couple of titles not long ago, and he was talking about he played schoolboy rugby for Australia, and he said the bottom line is you lose too many of your players at 15 and 16 to the NRL. And until you start going from losing 90% to getting closer to 50-50, you're just not going to be able to stand up. And we see that, don't we? I think we see that with the playmakers, and it's probably unfair to signal out one or two people in particular, but when you see an Ito come into it and really step up as a 21-year-old, which is what we see on a week-to-week basis in the NRL,
yep.
You start to go, well, we're losing too many of the better playmakers who have paid the big dollars, and they're always the ones that are picked out first by NRL clubs because they see the talent. But they've got the talent identification officers that are going all around. You don't have a coach that's on the other side of the Trans-Tasman for so long who's not going to club boy, schoolboy rugby, because these are the people that need to be identifying who the best talent is coming through the system. So there's a bit of that. I still think there's an argument around Super Rugby. Is it best serving Australia? Is it best serving New Zealand? We saw the Stormers do a pretty good job on the All Blacks last week. Dan Fury at 39 is still doing the business. He's just been called back to the Springboks. I think that also tells you that players can keep going and deeper into their late 30s than ever before. Brad Thorne was doing it at 40, wasn't he?
Yep.
So, but I think there needs to be a clear plan that's just not dictated by a broadcast deal that may hover between $40 to $60 million a year. There needs to be so much more around how do we grow this into a proper entity.
And just finally on the schools, we know that the NRL have long been invested in the private schools. They've got deals with any number of schools between Canberra, Sydney and Brisbane, whether it's sporting scholarships or the clubs are paying the wages, paying their fees rather. So look, the clause are already in there from the NRL, and if the tide isn't turned, soon enough, then they'll get in even further.
And the other, indeed, and the other point to that is that people go, well, no, Rugby Australia's just done a great initiative. They've picked a couple of guys, props from France, who are playing for the junior Wallabies. Well, they're not capped, firstly. Are they coming home? There were 6 of them that met with them last November for, the week of the Wallabies game in France. If they're coming home, they're costing hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that's the reality. So can they afford it? They can't, and they won't. So they don't want to necessarily invest in front rowers like they do outside backs.
Yep.
So it's not an easy argument.
Absolutely.
But you need to have, I think, if not weekly discussions around these sorts of things. It has to be monthly, and it has to be from people like Phil or Dan Herbert, Peter Horn, when's the last time Peter Horn actually spoke in a forum or in a summit or in a press conference arena, other than one or two very media managed quotes that are sent out to a journal occasionally? Like the hard questions aren't delivered to them enough because they're not allowed to be.
Yep. I wouldn't argue with that. Okay, mate, a couple more to finish up with. I think, actually, a good one here. What's your tips for where Isaac Lucas ends up internationally? Is there any hope, or have we lost him to Japan? From Tom McCarthy.
I spoke to him actually 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And then I saw Matt Lucas with Alicia Quirk, now Lucas, at the 10-year reunion, which was a great initiative from RA to do it last week at the Sydney Football Stadium. Their partners all came down. Isaac Lucas, he hasn't shut the door in Super Rugby. He won't be coming back next year, but yeah, in a couple of years' time, if Eddie Jones, for whatever reason, doesn't decide to pick him, then yeah, I think he'd be very much a person you look at. But is he going to win you a World Cup? I don't necessarily think so, but I think he's a very talented 10-15 prospect.
We mentioned the Greatest Rivalry Tour underway. The Stormers taking it up to the All Blacks in a good first hit out in Cape Town. That continues. Is it the Bulls next up? Maybe Sharks. Sorry, Sharks. Wednesday night with Ma Nonu. As you mentioned, 40-year-old Ma Nonu still getting it done around the place. Injury to Billy Proctor in that game against the Stormers. Fractured shoulder blade or scapula in there. So he will return home. The second player after George Bell last week. Look, it creates some kind of opportunity for Dave Rennie to go, okay, Rishi Mwanga, get your backside to the Republic. We want you in here. Clearly not a like-for-like replacement. You do wonder whether the New Zealand Rugby Board would let it fly. That is the question. Do you see that unfolding? Dave, overnight, I think, was kind of keeping his cards close to his chest a little bit. I get the feeling he knows that might not be possible at this point in time, but where do you think it lands?
He had a chuckle about it, didn't he? Just a slight mutter under his breath. It's a really fascinating one because, it does allow for that opportunity. I don't think you want 4 10s.
No.
In a squad.
You're going to need all the key across the entire positions across a rugby team to get through this, demanding tour. And
it creates friction, doesn't it? If they all want to play, no one wants to just go there and hold tackle bags. So I think Richie Mo'unga there'd be a bit of extra kudos if he wasn't picked and he was just playing NPC. Yep. But it's not about kudos, is it, per se? David Hivilli, there's a couple of guys in there that probably deserve a crack.
Bismarck. Duplessis Karifi.
Duplessis Karifi now could be a left field option. He's actually not a bad option, though, is he? It's a long tour.
Hybrid player.
I'm not saying he's a 12, but he there was a beautiful highlights moment there for him in the weekend to sell that he is. But I wonder whether or not that's just he might be the next one, because there's going to be another back that goes down over the next week or two, and then you bring him in. That's maybe the way I'd lean it. I don't know if you need to rush him in immediately. Obviously, Barrett and McKenzie can play 15 as well, which maybe allows for that argument to have as your specialists tend to go there. But maybe it's unnecessary at the moment.
Yeah, that one from Az, who also points out Dion Fourie at, what was he,
39?
Incredible, still getting it done.
World Cup winner. He was excellent in that World Cup final when he came on early as well and played 60, 70 minutes at hooker. Unbelievable.
A true hybrid forward. Alrighty, mate, we're getting pretty close here.
Wallaroos squad's tomorrow. For whatever reason, it was told to me that it was going to be on the Monday. It's now on the Tuesday. I think they're still working Scotland to see if Sione can go in there as coach. I don't think it'll happen. But yeah, I tweeted out over the weekend that Mike Rutherford, Ben Mowen, Reg, Taylor, I think it is, that are going to be the assistants.
Okay.
With Tim Walsh as a program lead, whatever that means. So yeah, stay tuned around that. But their first game, Wallaroos' first game against the Black Ferns, August 22, so that's quickly coming up.
I've just got one more here around Super Rugby AU, obviously, which the draw was unveiled last week from DQ. What's the point of Super Rugby AU for 3 matches? The no money excuse was valid in the past, but not anymore. Rugby AU need to make a decent effort. It's an important engagement tool for fans. I think that's a fair point. And the value of getting more games into this, the players, 25 to 35 in these Super Rugby squads is massive. Clearly, the Waratahs might not have a coach if by the time this tournament kicks off. But it was a success last year. We saw a number of guys come through into Super Rugby via it last year. Just a response to that one.
I think the response would be that they are prioritising for the moment Australia A. There's got two matches in the US. I think there'll be a couple more maybe next year as well. That is going to take over 30 players there. So if you extended it, you're probably diluting your talent. I think what we're going to see over the next 12 to 24 months with both the men's and the women's program, we're actually already seeing it with the Wallabies. They are concentrating their energies. They're trying to follow and replicate the Canadian model where more test matches, less domestic product. Okay. What I think that does is ultimately harm your ability to bring players through, but it probably, because you're concentrating the talent into 30, 35 people, it probably helps those 35, but I think it does actually ultimately hurt you because you don't have a big enough base underneath.
And Marika Korobeti still going around.
Yeah, he's agreed to terms with Osprey. So he's the latest Aussie to go to that Swansea outport, seaside city. Welsh rugby kind of in disarray. It's interesting that they're plucking off, I wouldn't say the carcass of Aussie rugby, but they are going for some of those fringe players, aren't they? The Lawson Crichtons. We already see Liam Wright, Ryan Smith
went up there last year.
Lalakai Feketi's gone up there, and now Marika Korobeti. So just turned 34. He's 63 Test veteran and two-time John Eales medalist. Queensland thought about him. They offered him a wider squad thing, but that $60,000-$70,000
against a couple of €100,000, I suspect. Yeah,
I think about 2 to 280 somewhere in that bracket.
Fair margin there.
From an Aussie dollar. Yeah, so what is that? €150. You're taking that every day of the week.
James O'Connor. Will he be unveiled by the Western Force sooner rather than later?
He'll be unveiled, but I think it'll be later. I don't think it'll be just yet. They're working out a couple of other aspects to it, but he's still a big name out in the West. They're looking at Hamish Stewart, still at 12. Mac really interestingly played, I think, 12 on the weekend for UQ in their win over Brothers. Played well himself, but yeah, he'll be ending up at the Force, Will O'Connor.
All right, mate. I think that's a pretty good wrap. There's been a few more come in. Sorry, team, I haven't been able to get through them all, but there was a lot, obviously, in the Waratahs and that broader Rugby AU piece there. Again, we'll put in the request and see where we get to. Maybe try and get the Waratahs man in as well, up for a yarn.
So your scoreline prediction this week? You said 15 to 20 points.
I reckon it'll be around 40 to 22 this week. I see a better performance from the Wallabies, and I don't know if Japan can back up from that. Strong effort from them on the weekend. That would be, I would say, satisfactory. Anything beyond that, really good.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I reckon that will be very, very close to what it is. I'm not sure if Japan might even not get that 22 points. I reckon something a 40 to 15 kind of margin maybe.
And Huey Tyndall, mate, to answer your question, look, I don't know that there's a number of aperols that I could say firmly, confidently that I did consume. There were many. What's that meme that always comes up with a bloke, one of Trump's old men who was fronting the Senate committee or whatever, and he just says, more. That was me. Aperols, more. And the aperitif hour in Italy is undefeated. I can highly recommend Lake Orta as a travel destination. If you get up there, I won't be going back anytime soon with two at daycare. I'm screwed for the foreseeable future. Mate, fantastic to be back. Thanks for holding the fort alongside Britt. Another big thank you to Britt Mitchell for her work the last few weeks. Look forward to Saturday and jumping back in here again with the newly named studio, formerly known as the Schmidt House, and we'll rip it all apart again. Cheers.